Jai Baba. I'm thrilled to share my childhood story of my connections with Meher Baba through his loving ways that he brought people into my life who opened up inner pathways that later I realized were his beautiful pathways. And my mom was Christian but never went to church. My dad was Jewish but never went to synagogue. I was raised in an artistic, intellectual atmosphere, lots of love and fun, beautiful music, beautiful art, beautiful, thank you, Baba, good congenital felicity in this lifetime outside of New York City. And we lived in a town called Valhalla, New York, about an hour north of New York City. And my first intimations of something going on beyond little Cathy Haas was I would go into our bathroom and sit on the toilet and look down and see the linoleum tile on the bathroom floor. This old-fashioned tile had all sorts of interesting images in the tile. One particularly fascinated me. It was looking exactly like what I later saw on the rupee note of the three-headed Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva trinity, three-headed God that you see in the statues and the great, Ellora and all these amazing places in India. And I would stare at this tile that had this three-headed presence of something on there, and I would just be fixated on it. And one day, as I was once again in that well-used room by our family, all at once I heard this voice, "I am that I am." I looked around. Nobody there. Where in the world was that coming from? That disappeared, the memory of it faded. Somehow I became interested through friends who were going to church, and I was curious because we never went to church or synagogue, and I asked my bemused parents, could I go to church? And they said, well, if you want to. And I fell in love with Jesus when I went to church, and my Jewish dad and my non-church going Christian mom were even more bemused. But anyway, as I was avidly reading the Bible, now that I was a young, saved Christian girl, I don't know what I was, I read the Old Testament story of Moses going up on Mount Sinai and, well, who are you? And the voice, I am that I am. And when I read that, I must have been maybe 13, 14, I just was astounded, because then I remembered the voice when I was looking at the Vishnu, Brahma, Shiva image. And I thought, oh, Lord, this is very amazing. I have heard that before. So that was very intense and very meaningful. And around 10 years old, when I think it must have been about 9 or 10 when I had that experience, I was very fortunate to be enrolled in Miss Bernadine Paul's 5th grade class. She was monumentally, amazingly, what would you say? Her influence in my life was fabulous and directional and sacredly gifted to me. She always said later that she felt the 5th grade class was all about meeting me. She told me later as we befriended each other outside of that fifth grade classroom. So here I am, I come into the class and I sit down. Miss Paul hands out papers. I want you all to tell me who you are and write that down. So my name is Cathy Haas and I live in Valhalla and I have a mother and a father and a sister and this and that. Then we handed our papers back. She took all the papers and right away she said, here they are. I want you to now take your papers back. Who are you beyond your name, beyond your age, your sex, your family background? Who are you? I'm sure none of us in that fifth grade class in Valhalla, New York, ever thought of that before. And I had to think outside of all of what I thought was me. And that was really the beginning. I mean, that was another astounding experience. She would have us go on walks, and in groups we would be paired off. One would wear a blindfold, the other would guide the blindfolded student, and we would have to listen and smell and come back and write about what that was like outside of the senses that the sense of sight we usually used. That was very opening. She engaged us in what she called creative dramatics. She would read a story, then we would be asked to act it out in the classroom. It was very scary, and most of us wouldn't do it. Little by little, we would try. By the end of the year, we were all very happily involved in acting out these stories. And she would never fail anybody if you didn't stand up and do your creative dramatic rendition of, I don't know what it was, what stories. And she really opened us up that way through just spontaneous acting. We put on a big play. She was going to take us on a big trip, which fell through for various reasons, but we were all excited to go to Kalamazoo, Michigan, where she was going to take us where she was from. And the most important thing, I think, that she gave me in the midst of all this incredible opening of my inner life through her expert guidance and love, she was very loving, she would say to all of us, utilize your potential. That was the big, I guess that would be what that year was all about. So utilize your potential became this another tremendous inner gift. Okay, the year ended. We also invited her to our home, which my parents liked her so much, and I said, Mom, could we invite her? And we invited her for tea, and then she even invited a few of her favorite students to her house where there was a swimming pool, and that was very amazing that you could connect with your teacher and that she was a human being. I mean, that was incredible. Okay, so fast forward, I've dropped out of 3 years of going to Brandeis University in Massachusetts, and my best friend Annie Weld, later Annie Weld Bell, and I dropped out of college, took off, hitchhiked to Mexico, spent the summer in Mexico, then decided to hitchhike all over America. My poor parents, they spent all this money getting us to college, and then here we were in the middle of nowhere. They didn't know where we were and what was happening. And we were in the Albuquerque airport and trying to figure out what to do next. We had our bedding rolls and we were sleeping in the women's room, and then coming out and trying to figure out where we were going to go and who could we meet that would give us a ride or. Anyway, we walked out into the lobby one morning. Can't imagine what we looked like. bedraggled and hippie-esque, I guess. And who was walking through the lobby of the Albuquerque airport but Miss Paul? Now here it was, let's see, I think 10 or 12 years later. Yeah, I was 22. 12 years later. And I ran up to Miss Paul, and we embraced. I hadn't seen her since, I was 10 or 11. And Cathy, it turns out she told Annie and myself that she had decided that teaching wasn't her cup of tea and had developed an interest in dogs, and she had a very pedigreed dog that she was showing. She was now doing dog shows, and she was meeting her dog in the Albuquerque airport to go to some fancy show. So, what are you doing, Cathy? So, I kind of thought, well, I don't know. We were in college, and we're taking a break, and, And she looked at me after she heard what we weren't doing, or doing with no direction. And she said in this loving but intense voice, "What are you doing to utilize your potential?" Whew. I remember going back into the women's room, and Annie and I were bedding down for the evening in some corner of the Albuquerque airport women's room, and bursting into tears because I realized I was running away from something. I wasn't utilizing my potential. Annie and I, from that moment, decided with Miss Paul's kind of push and intervention at that critical moment, to go back to college, finish, get a degree, which we did. We hitchhiked back across America and graduated in the middle of the year. And I always loved our graduation because somehow Brandeis University had invited Danny Kaye to be the guest speaker. So Annie and I are sitting there on the row near where the professors in all their gowns and mortar boards are parading down to the stage, and there comes Danny Kaye, and Annie and I are like standing there because everybody's standing up, and I don't know if they're doing some sort of processional music, and we look and we see Danny Kaye, and we're going, "Oh, Danny Kaye, Danny Kaye!" And he looked at us, and he crossed his eyes, and he had put the mortar board in front of his, whatever. So that was the high point of my graduation from Brandeis University. And then, let's see, okay, we had this, I had exchanged phone numbers, but time and things, life goes on. We didn't stay in touch. And then Annie and I had this incredible experience when we were 23 the next year at the wedding of Annie's older sister, in which we both knew Mayor Baba was our spiritual guide and master, came to Myrtle Beach, had many amazing experiences, and time went by. Okay. After years in Myrtle Beach, marrying Tom Riley, more time goes by. He and I decide to move to Asheville, North Carolina. And a few months after we are in Asheville, we are asked to house sit for a friend there, and all at once, now this is, I think, really 1996, so what is that from, 2020, when we were 22, so 1970. I think I remember it was like 26 years later. Anyway, it's a long time later. All at once, the phone rings. I hear Tom saying, yes. What's your name? What is your name? Bernadine Paul? Yes, she's right here. And I rush to the phone, and it's Bernadine, it's Miss Paul, my 5th grade teacher. And she said, I tracked you down. I called your parents in Valhalla. I found their phone numbers, and they said you were traveling, and then that you were now had moved to Asheville, and so here I am. And I am now a holistic health practitioner. And I had a very strong feeling about 2 weeks ago that you have some serious, potentially serious health problems, and I want to help. I was astounded. I hadn't heard from her in 26 years. Literally 2 weeks before, I had an inner vocal conversation, sort of inner voice conversation with Baba, in which he was saying, your health could be at jeopardy, you really need to get some help. So I was, for those 2 weeks, looking around for somebody to help. All at once, Miss Paul calls out of the blue and says, I had this feeling 2 weeks ago you needed my help. I've tracked you down. What can I do? I'm going, oh my God. So I, then after I said, yes, I would love some help, I just told her about the voice. She said, yes, I really am here to help, and which she did. Supplements and suggestions. And she said, what have you been doing in the last years? Oh, first she said, we're really only 11 years apart. When you were 10, I was 22, so we're like, or 21, so we're like 11 years apart. So please call me Bernadine. So that was like major, because I had never thought of calling my 5th grade teacher by her first names. But here we are, adults, and I'm more of an adult. I said, Bernadine, this is just incredible. I'm so thankful. And then she told me about her path in this new world of helping others heal. And she said, what about you? And I told her about Meher Baba, that I'd had this experience and I was devoted to Meher Baba. She said, that's so amazing, because she and another woman healer were working together and living in, I think they were living in Las Cruces, and she knew Leatrice Shaw Johnson. So she was just amazed, because she knew about Baba, she had met Leatrice, and she was very, very happy that we were connected to Meher Baba. Okay, so she then actually comes through Asheville a number of times. One time, and I finally see her again, and she was extremely loving the next time I saw her, because I had been invited to be one of the guest singers at the Asheville Music Sahavas. I think it was the 2nd or the 3rd year. It was at the Odyssey School. I had had lots of trouble physically with my health, and I had been practicing for that 45-minute set, really like unable to even hardly stand up, because I was going through a lot of trouble with stomach and issues with stomach and intestinal issues. And so even when I gave my 45-minute set, I was really not well, but I just said, Baba, please help me get through this. I mean, I was really, I think I might have said I was sick. I wasn't feeling well at all, but I just gave my all, and I gave this concert. Miss Paul had said Bernadine had said she and her friend might be able to come through Asheville, and she was so happy. I come off stage almost like falling apart from not being well and giving my all 45 minutes concert. And there's Bernadine and her friend, and she's the first person that I fall into her arms, and she said, you're utilizing your potential. Oh my God. She came to my concert, and she was there to support me again. So I kept saying, I can't believe this. She said, well, I think you're my sister, and I've come here this time to help. And so I guess that the end of the story about utilizing your potential, I would say that when Tom and I moved back to Myrtle Beach, I knew that she was unwell. I was back and forth calling, but she wasn't well. I didn't realize how unwell she was. And I heard the day that we left Myrtle Beach, Asheville, to move back to Myrtle Beach, that Bernadine had passed, which was like this major shock because I hadn't been in touch in the last week or two, and I didn't realize how ill she was. So I just had this feeling when I came back here, I'm doing this on my own. It was like there was a bit of an orphan feeling. I'm coming back to what I felt was home without my sacred sister. But I felt her presence so strongly, and actually at the latest Asheville Music Sahavas, was it 2 weekends ago? I was fortunate enough to do a set with my friend Patrick O'Neill and a bunch of friends. That we did a presentation about Baba's 6 visits to America. And as I was about to go out on stage, of course I took Baba's name and said, "Baba, this is yours." And all at once I felt Tom, and then I felt Bernadine, and I heard her say, "I'm so happy you're utilizing your potential." Jai Baba. Well, I think because it is the anniversary of Kitty's birthday tomorrow, is August 28th. And I'm just so aware of how much Baba gave me through my connection with Kitty. And just today, in the mail, I got this lovely photo of young Cathy Haas, I wasn't married then, with Kitty, at Dilruba. And I have to say that when I moved back to Myrtle Beach in '79, and Jeff Wolverton, knowing that Carrie Bills was leaving and that there was help needed at Dilruba, Jeff suggested that I ask if I could volunteer, and then if they liked my work, they'd hire me, and that's really what happened, that I was able to volunteer. They accepted my request, and after a certain amount of time, I was called back into Elizabeth's room and very ceremoniously sat, I just think I remember, on her bed, or did I stand there? Anyway, I can't remember, but she very proudly said they were going to pay me, and the generous amount of $3.50 an hour. Now, I had been not working and not going back to my music teaching to be able to be there. Oh, I know how this happened. Okay, so when I moved back in '79, and I was then asked to volunteer, I just gave every free moment to them when they asked. But I didn't have a job, and I actually went on food stamps. I just thought, well, I'll somehow survive, because the most important thing is being here for Kitty and Elizabeth. And Elizabeth called me in, that's right, and she sat me down on her bed and she said, "Now, dear, do you need to be paid?" And I was so afraid to ask for payment. I just thought, well, that's not nice or something. So I said, "Oh, I'm fine," lying through my teeth. And the next day I thought about it. I really do need to be paid. I mean, I'm not starving because I had food stamps, but I'm on the edge. So I said, I called Jane Haynes and I said, "Jane, I really wasn't being honest with Elizabeth. I was feeling very shy, but I really could use some help financially." And then it's so funny when Elizabeth called me back and proudly told me they would give me $3.50 an hour, which of course wouldn't do much to assuage my my needs. So I then those of you who've read, my Dilruba Days book about the diaries of the years that I worked for Kitty and Elizabeth and Margaret visiting. So anyway, one of those early times when I was on the edge with the food stamps, Margaret Krask, I don't know why we were in Kitty's book room. Kitty wasn't there. Margaret was sitting in Kitty's seat, and I was sitting in the, the meeting greeting chairs. And she said, "What do you do? What do you do for a living?" And I said very proudly, "Well, I was teaching music, but now I'm helping Kitty and Elizabeth." And she looked like aghast and sort of said, "My dear, this is a nunnery. This is a house filled with old women. You're young, you're vital. Go out and do something. What did you do before?" And that's when I told her I taught music. Teach music. And, I mentioned that I like to sing, and she said, "Go out and sing and don't be afraid of the world. Baba likes to have us be in the world, and through it people hear about him through our good work." And she was very supportive and helped me start to look around and get teaching jobs and start teaching so that I could support myself, because working at Dilruba then I tried to be there as often as I could between working at the Montessori school downtown, working at St. Andrew's, Catholic private school, and teaching here and there, and having many, many wonderful years of being at Dilruba. Since Elizabeth died at the end of 1980, so I was fortunate to be with her, serving her from summer of 79 through the end of 80. Kitty, of course, lived till 1991, till she was 100 and a half, so 12 years with Kitty. And Margaret passed in 1990, so there were many years of her coming from teaching and being there in the summer and Christmas. Those were wonderful, wonderful times with her. There's so many amazing stories. One, I think, that was a beautiful lesson from Baba. Elizabeth was ailing, and I didn't realize in the fall of 1980 that, she was really not well at all, and that she would be soon to pass. And she became more demanding, and I would always be catching her strict admonitions to do this better, or why didn't you do that, and it became so difficult that I didn't want to go back to work. Actually, Margaret took me aside and sat me down and said, "Don't take it personally, Elizabeth is not well." And that really helped, to have an objective somebody outside of me and Elizabeth saying this wasn't Elizabeth's usual way. But then in December 6th, 1980, Elizabeth passed, and after the memorial, I came back into the house with Kitty, and I was thinking, how am I going to be able to work here, because I'm so upset at Elizabeth. The way she treated me was like, wow. And I saw a still photo from the '56 film of Baba outside the barn. We've seen that picture, we've seen that movie of Elizabeth standing nearby. Baba's hands are going out in this lovingly doing this, and the tree, the little holly tree is there that has just been planted. And I was saying to Baba, how am I going to be able to work here anymore? I don't know. I'm just so upset at Elizabeth. And as I saw that photograph on the mantle and Baba's doing this, I thought, oh my God, I thought something just exploded, and I heard what I feel was Baba's voice inside of me saying, that was how I was giving you my love. As I heard that incredible sentence reverberating inside of me, I felt all of the anger and upset disappear, and I felt only thankfulness for what had been given and love for Elizabeth, which has never changed. And all of that angst vanished completely. And I've often used that experience from the, that was summer, fall of 80 through her passing as to remind me when I'm going through a hard time or other friends are going through a hard time that Baba's doing something for our own good, even though it's hard for us to imagine that at the time. So many wonderful stories, of course. One day Elizabeth was saying, what do they call the community? I've heard, and then I remembered that the one of the phrases that was being used around town was the off-center community. And Elizabeth said, that sounds like a little bit dangerous, off-center. How about the nearby community? So Elizabeth was the one who sort of coined that phrase. I think we should call the community the nearby community. So she helped make us a little bit less off-center. That was a gift she gave our community. One day the phone was ringing off the hook. I had to make lunch. There's a line of people outside waiting to see Kitty. I'm asked in the middle of all this to make a bed in the spare room to the side that's now Buzz's office, and some guest was coming to stay. I rush in there with the sheets, the top, cover, and I short sheet the bed and, forget to put the top sheet on before the bedspread's on, and I'm probably swearing under my breath or maybe loudly, I don't remember, but all at once Elizabeth walks into the room, sits on the other bed, and I don't think I said, oh damn, I probably said, oh shucks. I short sheeted the bed, I've got to start all over again. Oh, and I'm just really upset. And Elizabeth very calmly said, yes, dear, that's what the spiritual life is like. Maintaining poise in the midst of intense activity. That has helped. We've all had intense activity years. One of my favorite stories about Kitty and her telephone habits around that time was that, she would often either talk and then in the middle of the conversation she would, the person on the other end of the line is still talking and click the phone. Back when there were receivers that went down. And this was known and everybody, was loving Kitty, wasn't upset about it. So I called about something one day. Kitty answered the phone and she said all at once, oh dear, Jane's calling, I've got to go. Just a minute, hold the line. And I hear, she's put the receiver down on the desk. I hear her feet leave the book room where she sold books, her office. And then I just decided, instead of hanging up, I thought I'd wait. A few minutes go by, footsteps coming back into the book room. All at once she's beginning a conversation with somebody who she had left in the book room. Oh, tell me your name again. Oh, Sherdil. Oh, is that your birth name? Oh, Joe Smith. Oh, okay. You've taken a Sufi name. And what do you do? oh, you drive a bus in Birmingham. Oh, how interesting. And this conversation is going on. All at once I hear the hoo, 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 hoo. And she picks up the receiver and she says, oh, are you still there? Are you still there? And I said, yes, Kitty, I just decided to wait to see if you would remember that I had called. She says, oh, yes, that's right. Well, I'm talking to Joe Smith, and he's changed his name to Sherdill, and he drives a bus in Birmingham. And you know, well, he's much more interesting than you are. Yeah, fabulous. Oh, so that's a story that's happily told. So many, you know, she was actually, a lot of her kiddieisms were very educated. She was really a highly educated woman. And one day at a luncheon, Lois and I were serving some young couple, and she said, yes, Myrtle Beach, it was very different in days before, long ago. Well, did you know there were pigs on the beach? Lois rushed out of the room and closed the kitchen door so she could laugh. We always tried not to laugh because Kitty started taking it personally that we were laughing at her. So we would try to control the laughter when the kiddieisms sprang forth. And I was sitting there trying to contain myself. But then we found out later, sure enough, there were wild boar that roamed the beaches. So there were pigs on the beach. Another, what we thought was an insane kiddieism. One day she said, yes, in ancient Thailand, Cambodia, Far East, there were Buddhist statues, and they were bedecked by jewels, very valuable jewels, and there were attack cats that would guard the statues so that nobody would steal those jewels. And I said, Kitty, there's no such thing. You mean an attack dog, you don't mean an attack cat. She's very indignant. No, attack cats. I know what I'm talking about. And I looked it up, and it turns out there were ocelot, like medium-sized wild cats that were actually trained to guard Buddhist statues in these ancient countries. So again, she was correct. You know, she wasn't. But there were so many silly kiddieisms. The one I'm reminded of is coming to mind. There's so many, but one day it was raining, and one of my jobs was vacuuming the house, cleaning the house, dusting, and I was then at the end of the day sitting with Kitty, maybe having a cup of tea in front of the fireplace, talking about the day. And as we were sitting there, a knock came at the door. Somebody came in, didn't take shoes off, left, and there was like sand all over the rug. And I said, oh, Kitty, I don't want to sound like a housefrau, but I'm just tired of vacuuming, and now I've got to, vacuum again. And Kitty said, yes, we've got to tell them to take their feet off at the door. And then, by this time, it was sort of later years, and she had heard the word kiddieisms a lot, and she says, oh, that's a kiddieism, oh. Take their feet off at the door. So that was one of my favorite kiddieisms. And I think I was mentioning this recently, how important something she told me toward the end of her life was for me. It reverberated in a way like Bernadine Paul's utilize your potential phrase that helped me tremendously, guided and helped. And one day I was saying something self-deprecatory, and it was toward the end of Kitty's life, and all at once she really lit into me, and she said, there you go again, you're saying something that is not nice about yourself. Now you're very talented in many ways. You can do anything. You could do anything you wanted to do. For some reason at the time, it felt like she was exposing something that was a difficulty that I tended to put myself down. And I felt very exposed, and I felt like I wanted the earth to open and to fall in. But as the months went by, I realized what a gift this was. You can do anything. And I just feel so strongly that for all of us, really, with Baba's help, we can do anything. You know, whatever, often when, you know, Kitty would always ask Lois and me and different ones there to help with this and that, and sometimes programs I was asked to MC, and I would just be so nervous, and then Kitty, you know, somehow I would get through. So I was remembering over all those years that she would sort of put us in challenging situations like Baba would do with his close ones. And you know, you have to rise to the occasion, and then you think, well, I got through that, you know. So that feeling that we all can do anything with Baba's help and his guidance. And I felt that was such a great gift from Kitty, that to trust him more and that he will help us overcome the weaknesses and the lack of confidences. And yeah, I feel like another beautiful, one of my favorite passages is a passage that happened in 1984, when I was asked to accompany Kitty to the Southeast Gathering. Ward Parks was giving a workshop. She wanted to go to Ward's workshop. And I went with Kitty. After he spoke and after this workshop, someone asked Kitty if she felt she had reached the point of love that we'd been discussing, of feeling love for everyone and everything, that omnipresent praise and awareness of Baba and his love in all things at all times, that state to which we are all aspiring. I watched fascinated as Kitty really took that very intimate question deeply into her being. She didn't answer for a long time, and everyone was very quiet. She stammered that she had never really thought about that before. Then, thinking very deeply, she slowly said, I don't really know. All I know is that I am always trying to please Baba, to think what would please him. Her answer was so honest, so simple, so uncosmic and unmystical. It revealed to me the essence of the nature of the spiritual life. Kitty really isn't feeling inundated with bliss and universal waves of love. Maybe at times, who knows? But she is always putting Baba first. She is thinking first of what would please Baba, constantly, constantly. It really affected me on a deep level. She is so service-oriented, not really thinking about feeling bliss or love in rapt meditation. It is just caring and trying to please Baba and make Baba happy. She went on to say how important and how beautiful the word please is. How it is very necessary and desirable to try in our lives to please Baba and make him happy. She said Baba would never say thank you to something one of his lovers had done for him. He would only say he was pleased with one's love or pleased with what one had done. Another passage I've found very meaningful lately. Kitty was talking to some visitors about the Blue Bus Tour and how the group were older with strong personalities, our egos grated against each other. She then began to talk of what Baba had come for, what his main work was. She stressed that if she had to encapsulate it, it would be that Baba came to bring about a change in awareness, in the consciousness level of mankind. We all agreed that many subjects are discussed in our time that were never discussed previously. How children are much more aware in our modern world than before. These seem to be signposts that Baba was speeding up our awareness worldwide. Kitty went on to talk of Baba not directly teaching, but through his example and through situations he brought about, he increased one's awareness of oneself. She stressed the importance of becoming more aware of one's strengths and weaknesses and need for internal change. She also talked of the supreme realness of the spiritual world versus the world of Maya or illusion. Kitty was so articulate. I wish I'd had a tape recorder, as the grandness of the call to follow one's higher self with Baba's guidance is so fully manifested in her speech and being. When one hears Kitty speak, one is stirred to want to give one's best, one's all, for Baba. After Kitty passed, I had a very strong dream in which she came to me. A number of us were following her in a European landscape, and all at once she turned around. She was walking rapidly and turned around, and a few of us in the front stopped, and I was right behind her, and she looked right at me, and I remember Lois was there too, Lois Brager, and she said very intensely, "What have you done to utilize the training that I gave you?" And I didn't feel like she was really angry. She was just very intense and sort of serious. So I woke up remembering that, and I thought to myself, what have I done to, utilize her, the training? So I actually, in part of the book, what I called reflections, I went over what I felt was her training. Yeah, I want you to take more responsibility in my work. You must become more involved. What have you done with all of your training? So some of the points I think I'll just read, and for those of you who are more interested, more is given here in the book. She talked about, she and Elizabeth, both of them, and Margaret, the danger of occult involvement, the importance of focus and attention to detail in service of others. Poise, Elizabeth, me particularly, remain poised. Do your best, then let Baba do the rest. Johnny Doe, we've all heard that phrase, let it go. Do your best and then let it go. Having a sense of humor was totally important in the midst of intense activity. To anticipate their needs, Elizabeth and Kitty and Margaret's needs, would Elizabeth need her cup of afternoon coffee now that she's gotten up for her nap? Would Kitty need to be told to go down for a nap? And of course, I just know that they were always anticipating Mayor Baba's needs when they were with him, and when they were with him when he wasn't in their presence anymore too. Trust your own intuition and ability. We all have an inner voice, and to trust that voice and really use it to help you do what you need to do. Punctuality, I always tended to be late, and I was hammered for that time and again. They were so busy, and to be late just wasn't nice. And they reminded me that Baba said to be on time, or even better, to be early. Take your stand on the truth within. Sometimes they would ask for my opinion about things, and there were things that were maybe not something that was in intensity in the community, and they wanted to sort of know more about it. And sometimes I wouldn't enumerate, or I just felt like I shouldn't say anything, but I think they want, if there was something that might really be amiss in which somebody might need some help or somebody else might need to know something, they wanted to make me take my stand on what the truth was within. Go the extra mile. So many times Kitty would be tired. Somebody had invited her for dinner. I'd leave for the day to teach, come back, spend the night, and she wasn't even there. And then she'd come back like an hour later and looking all perky, and I'd say, Kitty, you were exhausted this morning. And she said, oh yes, but so-and-so invited me for dinner, and I couldn't say no. Baba, she said something about when they were on the Blue Bus tours and there was the hot day going to the Lahore Zoo, and she wanted to stay in the bus, and Baba said he wanted her to come, and she went anyway. And so she was using this as a reminder to make others happy, go the extra mile. And there she was, probably 95 years old doing this. Memory training, oh yeah. So Kitty or Elizabeth would say, remember to tell me tomorrow, or remember to tell me next week, or sometimes next month. And often Kitty would say, weren't you supposed to remember? She would tell me. So now everybody does these Wordle and these games and these crossword puzzles, or they look on their iPhone or whatever for somebody's number. But, memory, honing your memory was an important part of Baba's training for them, I think, and for us too. Resist backbiting. I remember being at a table with Kitty and some other people when somebody was going to, and Kitty looked at me and just very quietly said, I want to leave, and just got up, and we left the table and left the restaurant. But she also mentioned that a number of times. Resist backbiting. Let others help. I wanted to sort of be there all the time at Dilruba, but others, you have to stand back and let others help too, and just give others the opportunity. That was kind of hard for my ego, but it was important. Don't give so much of yourself away. Kitty would always say, now, especially after I married, now, why are you going here and doing that and coming here to, you should spend more time with Tom. Just don't give so much of yourself away. Just find some time for yourself. Find some time to be quiet with your husband, with yourself, with Baba quietly. Make your life's work something you love to do. Yeah. I think I was in my earlier years not able to figure out what I wanted to do, but it became clear that I loved music, and teaching music would be a joy instead of doing something that I thought I had to do or that might make me lots of money, or but that Margaret Krask helped me with that. And the greatest of these is love. Love was the guiding force at Dilruba. Everything revolved around that great love. Thus, it's fitting to end this chapter with one of my favorite quotes of Meher Baba. This was a quote that Baba said to Bal Natu. Baba said, you will have mukti, to Bal Natu, and then he said, but let your love flow on ceaselessly like a stream down the mountain on its way to the ocean. Obstructions there will be, of pleasures, of pains. Pass by these as passing phases. There will be flowers and thorns by the bank and in the flow. Do not get attached. Do not get affected. Go on, and let the stream become a river. Doubts may assail you. Self-complacency may lure you. But with love in the heart, roll on, flow on to me, the ocean. Worry not, fear not. I am the ocean of love.